What's going on, guys, and welcome to my review of The Gorge, the latest film from Scott Derickson and the newest film to drop straight to streaming exclusively on Apple TV+. This movie kind of flew under the radar for me, which is a bit surprising given a lot the notable names that are attached to this project. Like I said, you got Scott Derrickson in the director's chair, you got Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy as the two leads, you even got Sigourney Weaver showing up for a small role here. And so I think the main reason this movie flew under my radar is simply because movies that drop straight to streaming kind of already give me cause for pause just off that factor alone. And Apple TV Plus in general is not a streaming service that I'm all that familiar with. I actually had to renew my subscription to watch this film. And, I never hear really great things about the movies that have been released on there. I know that a lot of their most notable works are TV shows, but reception-wise, what I always hear about their movies is they tend to underwhelm in that department. But I decided to check this movie out because since its release a few days ago, I've noticed a bit of a buzz circulating it, and given the names I just mentioned that are attached to it, I figured I'll give this a shot, and maybe this will be the movie that puts Apple TV Plus back on my radar moving forward. So essentially what this movie's about is you have Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy playing these two specially trained operatives who are selected to guard opposite sides of this giant gorge, and they're not allowed to have contact with each other, but over time, through means of long distance communication, they start to develop a relationship, and eventually they begin to uncover the truth of exactly what is in the gorge and what the true purpose of their mission is. That premise alone already had me intrigued, but another thing was I started to see people talk about how many genres this movie is blending together, and I always find it interesting when movies try to take new takes on genres or blend multiple subgenres, and this movie definitely does that. And I actually thought it was pretty funny. I caught a screenshot of the Wikipedia page for this movie, and the very first line describes The Gorge as a 2025 American science fiction romantic action horror film. And I just thought that was really funny, and I can't think of a movie that has tried to juggle that many genres together or get labeled with that many genres and actually do enough with each genre to warrant being labeled in those categories. But I think The Gorge actually does a pretty solid job considering everything it's trying to accomplish. Now, to be honest, I'm a bit split on this movie. I think on the whole, I ended up liking more than I disliked, but this may be the kind of movie where the mixed category is where I spend a majority of this review. But before we get into the review, I'd like to ask why you're here to go ahead and give the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you like movie reviews, and get in the comments and let me know what you thought of this film, or if you haven't seen it, tell me if you're looking forward to it. I'd love to hear from you guys, and I would appreciate all the support. So kicking off with the positives, and I think what I enjoy the most about The Gorge is just how great the chemistry is between Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy. At this movie's core, it's really a romance film, and I totally bought into the budding relationship of their two characters over the runtime of the movie, and they both have natural charm and charisma, which are both on full display, but I also found them to be quite funny and entertaining as well. And so as far as romantic leads go, I think they are really, really strong in that regard, and I think this movie is at its best when the love story actually is the focal point. On the horror side of things, given Scott Derrickson's filmography with films such as The Black Phone and Sinister, he's earned my trust that he can deliver an effective horror experience, and I think he does do so here. Once we get to see what's down in the gorge, this is really the part of the film where horror kind of takes center stage, and this is where we see a lot of cool creature designs. The environmental designs and the settings of everything are really, really cool, and they make a lot of unique and creative choices with a lot of the designs here that create an effective, horrific atmosphere that I really, really enjoyed. To my eye, it seemed like a lot of inspiration was actually taken from horror video games such as Silent Hill, Resident Evil 4, and The Last of Us. And honestly, I could argue that maybe the influence was a little too apparent in some moments, but I think they do enough and they put their own unique creative spins on things to avoid them from just being complete clones of those influences. The few action sequences we get here are also really solid. The real big one that we kind of get in this movie is hampered by something that I'll get into a little bit later in the review. But strictly from an action standpoint, in like terms of gunplay and stuff like that, I found them all to be pretty entertaining. And nothing special, maybe not the craziest action sequence we've ever seen, but given how many genres and stuff this movie is trying to do and juggle, I think they do a pretty good job in this aspect. I mean, seeing two A-listers mow down monsters with machine guns is always going to be a good time, right?
Hell yeah!
Moving on to the mix now, and here I'm going to get back to the horror side of things. Now, as I just mentioned, Scott Derrickson does deliver an effective horror experience. However, with that being said, in this movie specifically, he may have actually over-delivered, and I'll explain. Pretty much all the horror moments in this movie take place within this one kind of 30 minutes or so stretch of the film, and because it's all isolated to this one portion of the movie, it kind of feels tonally out of place because it's not like anything that comes before it, and it's not like anything that comes after it. So it kind of feels like you're really watching a whole other movie during this sequence of events, and I honestly think the horror might have needed to be tuned down a bit because he does go for such an effective experience that he really does go. Scott Derrickson really does go all out on the horror, but it might have needed to be dialed back a little bit just so it can match up better tonally with the rest of the movie. It kind of felt like if you were listening to some romantic jazz song and then out of nowhere for a good 30 seconds, these heavy guitars and death metal vocals came in, and then bam, it just goes right back to the romantic jazz song. And that may sound awesome to you, but for me personally, it kind of gave me this whiplash feeling in regard to the tone. However, there's still a lot of badass stuff that happens during this sequence of the film, so there was still a lot of fun to be had, and because I was able to still have a lot of fun with it despite the gripes I may have, that's why it's going in the mixed category of this review. Now, though Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy do have great chemistry and do a really good job at leading this movie, I will say that them as characters don't really have much to them individually. All their development is kind of centered around the budding relationship between the two, rather than them having an individual arc for either of themselves, other than trying to survive the events of the movie. But luckily, being that they are two really good actors, I was still very invested in their relationship, and I didn't necessarily need them as individuals to have arcs. It's just that I think it would have put them over even more if they did. Moving on to the negatives, and I just want to ask real quick, can we please stop casting Sigourney Weaver as this character? Obviously, she is a legend and an icon, and so if you're going to have her, can you please not just rely solely on that and actually make her character interesting? I feel like every year now we're getting a movie where Sigourney Weaver plays this character, and I feel like that is such an utter underutilization of someone of her status and talents. So please stop doing this to her. Now getting into my real gripe with this movie, and unfortunately this is going to be the second review in a row where you have to listen to this guy bitch at clouds about CGI.
Shut up!
This is a very CGI driven film. I mean, there's almost no practicality to anything in regards to the effects here, and so when you do that, the CGI needs to look really sharp, and unfortunately here it is not. I said earlier that there was one thing that kind of hampered the main action sequence we get in this movie, and the CGI is that one thing that I was talking about. Now, all of this is most prevalent, again, during the sequence where we're down in the gorge, and I gave credit where credit is due in terms of the design of everything. However, it in motion and in relation to the human characters, it did not look that good. It gave me really strong Star Wars Attack of the Clones vibes.
I don't like sand.
And I know that's going to be a weird comparison, but if you watch that movie and then you watch this movie, you'll see it's got that feeling where when you're looking at the screen, you clearly just see two actors surrounded by green screens, and everything around them just kind of feels weightless in a sense. And that could all be fine. I'm not saying everything here had to be practical. That might have been really hard to pull off given everything that they're trying to accomplish here, but there was a lot of PS2 cutscene B movie level quality CGI on display here, and I don't really know why. It wasn't like this movie was strapped with a super tight budget. It's just it didn't seem like it got enough attention as it should have to make it look really crisp and sharp and flow well with the actual present actors. So yeah, again, I hate to gripe about CGI. I hope that doesn't become my thing. I don't want to be the old man yelling at clouds, CGI is ruining movies, but this just happens to be a second review in a row where the CGI was a real problem for me, and I can't help but point it out as it was the most distracting thing about this movie. I also felt like this movie kind of wrapped up a little too easily and conveniently, and we established this threat and we know the dangers that lie at the bottom of this gorge, but it doesn't really seem like it was all that hard to defeat it as maybe it should have been, and so it doesn't do anything offensive, but it just felt a little weak considering everything we had seen building up to that moment. So yeah, guys, those are my thoughts on The Gorge. I'm feeling a 6.5 out of 10 here. If this was a movie that had gotten a theatrical release, it's not one I would recommend you go spend a bunch of money to go see at a theater. However, being that it's already on a streaming service, I think that's the best place for it. And there, it could be worth your time. I think the leads are really strong. The premise is unique. There's still some cool creature designs in here. And being that it is blending all these genres together, there is something in it for everyone. So I actually think it's a really strong stay-at-home date night kind of movie. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you have seen it, did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? If you haven't seen it, are you excited to check it out? While you're here, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in the next review. Peace.